Lesson 95, Spelling Rules. Between here and the end of the book, we're going to be discussing certain rules in Russian called spelling rules. And in a nutshell, these rules tell us that certain letters cannot come before or after other letters. In other words, you can't put this letter after that letter. Instead, you have to put this letter, and so on and so forth. And these rules are not just arbitrary rules. They are based in practical concerns, practical issues of pronunciation, and they're really just common things that happen in linguistics. And a lot of the rules like this, both in Russian and in other languages, really, when you boil it all down, it really comes down to what is convenient for the human mouth to pronounce. There are just simply certain sound combinations that are easier for the human mouth to say than others. And in English, we have spelling rules too. In fact, in English, we have all kinds of strange spellings because English has all kinds of archaic spellings from previous stages of the language. Also, we have lots of words borrowed from Latin, lots of words borrowed from French. So English is kind of a hodgepodge of languages all mixed together. But just to get you prepared for the upcoming spelling rules that we are going to see in Russian, I'd like to show you a spelling convention, perhaps, that we have in English that's not exactly a written rule, but it's a rule that all the words follow. And again, it's based on pronunciation, what is easy for the human mouth to actually do, what's easy for the human mouth to say. And so in this lesson, I just want to, again, just get in your mind the idea of spelling patterns, spelling rules, spelling conventions. So in this lesson, we're going to take a look at the COM prefix that we see on lots of English words. All the words we're looking at here in these bulleted lists, they come to us from Latin. In Latin, CON is a common prefix. It's related to the word in Latin that means with. And so it means together or with, and it can also be an intensifying kind of prefix. Suffice it to say that it's a common prefix in Latin. And so when we borrow all those Latin words into English, we get all those same things happening in English. So we have lots of examples here of words with a CON, and these are all compound words, that is, some word that has had CON added to the front of it as a prefix. The word connection, the NECT part of the word, is related to the word nexus. It means to tie or connect things. In the word contempt, the TEMPT part of the word comes from a Latin word that means to try or test. In the word confession, the FESS part comes from a Latin word that means to say something. So these are all compound words, but notice what happens when the original word that CON is being added to begins with the letter P. Look at the second bulleted list, and you'll see words like compression, companion, computer, and so on and so forth. All these words have something in common. The original word that is being prefixed begins with the letter P. And so whenever you have that, the letter N in the CON prefix turns into the letter M. Now you may be wondering, why does that happen? And the reason is that it's easier for the human mouth to pronounce. When you say the letter P, that's what we call a labial sound. In Latin, the word labium means lip. And so in linguistics, things that involve the lips are called labials. So the letter P, we call that a voiceless labial stop. That's the fancy schmancy term for it. And in a nutshell, what happens is when you say the letter P, you have to put your lips together and make a puff of air. So your lips are involved in making that sound. That's why it's called a labial. So if we add the CON prefix to it, what we have is the letter N followed by the letter P. And I have a few examples here in the third bulleted list. Compression. When you have an N followed by a P, it's really kind of hard to say. Compression. Going from the N to the P sound is just really awkward. When you say the letter N, your lips are not together, and in fact, they're rather far apart. So then to go from the letter N sound to the P, your mouth has to make a big shift. Your tongue has to move, your lips have to move, and you have to build up pressure behind your lips to create the puff of air. And so it's awkward. And so that gets fixed by changing the letter N to the letter M. Going from M to P is not hard at all. Compression. Now, why is that easier? Here's the answer. Because when you say the letter M, you're putting your lips together. And then, because your lips are already together, when you say the letter M, your lips are already in place to begin making the P sound. Compression. The M and the P just flow together because your lips are already together and your mouth doesn't have to make that awkward movement. And so here's a good word to know. It's a word you see in linguistics. It's called assimilation. So what is happening here is the linguistic phenomenon known as assimilation. Assimilation is when you take one letter and make it similar to the letter that comes after it. When you add the CON prefix and you have a word like compression, the letter N is not like the letter P, and so it's awkward to say. So we take that N and we change it to something that is more similar to the following letter. We take that N and we make it similar to the P by changing it into an M. And so the M is now more similar to the P because pronouncing the letter M involves the lips. Again, that's called assimilation. Assimilation, again, is when you take one letter and you make it more similar to the next letter in order to smooth out pronunciation. You see this all the time in Latin. You see it all the time in ancient Greek. And this is an example really of a spelling rule. It's not a written spelling rule, but a spelling rule nevertheless. It does exist. So this is an example of a spelling rule that is based on practical linguistics, just the practical concerns of pronunciation. It's not some arbitrary rule that's been foisted on us. It's just really a description of what the human mouth wants to do and what is easy for the human mouth to do. So that's the kind of thing we're going to see with spelling rules in Russian. We're going to see spelling rules that talk about letter combinations that are awkward and replacing them with letter combinations that are easier to say and that aid in pronunciation. So that's the kind of thing we're going to see in the next lesson, in lesson 96, and then again later in lesson 110.